Apologies for the Portuguese speakers and the translators. I'm going to have to go a little fast to fit this in the time slot. But I want to talk a little bit about data markets, specifically the availability of information to be accessible to people who want it. And this is just a very important thing in the terms of society in general. Like, what is a society if you don't remember your past? If you can't really think about the things you've done, like mistakes you've made, things you want to learn from, like, can you even call that a society without a memory of what came before? And in this day and age, we're kind of getting to a point where all of our information is digital and online. Like, in 2016, every person on the internet is making 1.7 megabytes of data a second. Every day, every second. And like, we're just getting to a point where this information is getting lost just out of apathy, people not caring about it. Sometimes people in power specifically suppressing certain information that they don't want people to see or be exposed to. And this is a very existential problem that the human species has to deal with. Like, the Internet Archive, right before the election in the US, was hit with a denial of service attack. And they essentially had to shut down the ability to archive new websites. So for the last week or so, all the prior existing archives are still there, they're still accessible, but nobody was able to make new ones. And this is like a hugely important piece of infrastructure on the internet used to ensure that information doesn't disappear. It doesn't just get swept under the rug, but it's a completely centralized thing. And this just proves the point, depending on that, can be very dangerous. Because now, during a hugely important political event in the United States, this service was not accessible in order to keep records of things. So let's look at BitTorrent. Prior to Bitcoin, this is one of the most elegant, amazing protocols ever designed. Like, they literally, or Bram rather, literally accomplished a beautiful thing. When you take a centralized service and try to make it decentralized, usually it winds up becoming less efficient. It becomes more kludgy. BitTorrent is more bandwidth efficient than a central server delivering data as a decentralized system. And that's an amazing thing, the way that it spreads the upload cost of information between everybody involved, rather than having a single server have to bear all those costs. But the problem, though, is it can get the data around, but it doesn't keep it around. This curve is from the original white paper that Bram wrote shortly after creating BitTorrent, kind of looking at the reality of how files stay available. If you look at the red line, that's leechers, so people downloading the file, and the blue line is seeders, so people actually uploading it for other people to download. And pretty much every torrent in existence follows this curve to one degree or another over some time scale. A file is made available. Everybody goes, yay, I want this. They download it, and during the process of downloading, upload it to other interested users. But eventually, it tapers off, and it's just not being seeded or made available for new people to download it after that initial frenzy where people go after the information. And this is just kind of how torrent works. And to kind of put a very serious example of like why this is a negative thing, look at an organization like WikiLeaks. Like, they have exposed some of the most important political information in the last 2 decades. You can't download those over BitTorrent anymore. Like, if you actually go look for a WikiLeaks dump, the magnet link, there's nobody seeding them ever. Like, the only place you can actually get these files is Internet Archive. As I said, a highly centralized, service that if it disappears, well, what do we do then? So how can Bitcoin kind of enter this picture and try to address this shortcoming of BitTorrent. The most popular way that people kind of think about this is just having people buy information. Like if I want a piece of information, I'll just give you money and then you can give it to me. But this doesn't address the actual kind of root problem that creates this curve in the first place. There is the initial frenzy of people wanting information, and then after that frenzy's died off and everybody who wants it has it, what's the incentive for somebody to keep that data around and sell it? Like nobody wants to buy it anymore. They already did. So let's look at eCash systems really quickly. A totally centralized private token that can be backed by Bitcoin. But there's no real inherent need for it to be backed by Bitcoin. It's pretty much the user generates a random value and then performs an operation on it called blinding and has the server sign it. And so that value and that signature are now notarized by the mint. And when they get that back, they can reverse that blinding operation that they did, not only on the token they generated, but on the signature that the mint made. And that signature remains valid on the unblinded value now. And so now they can go to the mint, redeem this, and the mint has no way to associate that redemption to when it was issued. So let's look at tying all of these things together with BitTorrent. This is a project two anonymous people published the beginning of this year that looks at addressing the incentive for keeping people seeding a torrent, but does not actually depend on, like I said, the consumer model, where I, a consumer, want information, so I pay somebody with that information to get it. And the way it does this is essentially create a lottery. So the mechanism here, this is a tree of transactions essentially from the white paper. You can see transaction 1, transaction 2, 3, and somebody who wants to keep a file or a piece of information around can essentially create a long chain of pre-signed transactions like that where they're time locked so that you can only submit one and then have to wait a long period before you can submit the next. And each of these green squares is a payout to an eCash mint. And so what the mint can do is communicate with people running a special BitTorrent client and monitor the swarm or the actual torrent clients kind of downloading and seeding from each other. And whenever it sees this Durabit like special torrent client, it can test it to ensure that it actually has pieces of the file that it's supposed to be seeding. And every time it passes this test, it issues that client an eCash token that's essentially like a lottery ticket. And this is kind of the flow of how this would work. Like the mint would be monitoring any torrent that had this set of pre-signed transactions associated with it and issue these tickets. And every time they're able to use one of these transactions to claim funds from this bond, essentially, for this file, they would pick a winner by looking at something like a block header, for instance, in the block that that transaction was confirmed in, and then having everybody turn in all the eCash tickets they've been issued, and whichever one is closest, the mint splits that Bitcoin payout with that person. So it essentially creates like a mining-like lottery where just by seeding this file that somebody paid to keep around, everybody has a chance to actually earn Bitcoin in doing that. And what this does is address that curve that we saw earlier, where everybody gets the file, so they just stop uploading it, they stop making it available. Well, this is the incentive to keep doing that. And unlike a situation where you're just directly selling information to the consumer, this incentive sticks around long term. Like, as long as there is still Bitcoin left in this set of transactions, people will seed this file because it is a chance for them to earn Bitcoin. And the important thing here is really that this doesn't subject the incentive structure to keep this information around to essentially short-term consumerist behavior. Like, I don't think I need to deeply go on a philosophical rant about how sometimes people value very stupid, meaningless things and kind of take for granted or don't value things of very serious societal or cultural importance. This allows you to create an economic incentive disconnected from that kind of short-term thinking to actually preserve something that might be very valuable in the long term, even if people don't value it right now in the short term. And another important aspect of this is just a set of pre-signed transactions that somebody gives to this mint operator to kind of play this role of splitting up funds with people actually sharing the file. That can be revoked. You just simply double spend the transaction, and then that invalidates all remaining ones. So anybody who creates one of these bond structures can kind of check in with the mint from time to time. And if they see that the mint is not operating honestly, they're not splitting up funds with people actually keeping the file available like they should be, then whoever created this bond can just revoke it like that and go reissue it to some other mint. So this creates kind of a check on the mint who is the one actually receiving all of these Bitcoin payouts so that they don't just essentially keep all of the money for themselves and not actually do anything to incentivize people to keep torrenting and seeding whatever files somebody paid to keep around. And the last part, you don't even personally have to care like about the information that you're uploading for other people. It's just if you upload that, you have a chance to actually make money. And so this could be put to a lot of different uses, like I said earlier in the talk, whistleblower information, such as stuff that WikiLeaks publishes, to ensure that that's actually available and distributed for people to see whatever corrupt or heinous, disgusting things that people in power or in their government are doing and how they're abusing their power. Obviously, the OG BitTorrent use case, pirating copyrighted material. You're never going to build a system using BitTorrent that doesn't enable that in one way or another. Sci-Hub is another example. It's a kind of ragtag operation that takes academic papers or scientific papers hidden behind paywalls and makes them freely available. You could have those distributed over torrent and incentivized to stay around like this. And the way the protocol works, in the actual magnet file, if there are multiple files in the torrent, you can actually see and identify all of those file names and what pieces of the torrent stream are associated with that. So you could even do something very granular, like only grab out of that torrent the papers that you're interested in. My personal favorite thing, you could build a decentralized version of the Internet Archive. Like, all they're doing is just making a local copy of a website and going, this existed in this state at this time. There's a really cool tool called TLS Notary, which uses an oracle to get an attestation that somebody's TLS certificate signed the contents of a website. So if you get that, download the website locally, and open timestamp that, you have an even stronger guarantee that than what Internet Archive provides, that a website existed, it was legitimately served by this certificate, and it existed in this state at this time. And who knows what else somebody's going to come up with a system like this, like information that you can distribute and keep available like that. And so, just barely making it in time, this is a very serious kind of existential crisis we find ourselves in. The entire world is running on the internet nowadays, and it is metastasizing and being completely subsumed and taken over by these highly centralized services that we depend on for everything. Like, we need to fix this. We need to make the internet what it was supposed to be, a decentralized system beyond a single point of control. So thank you for listening, everybody.